Right now, as you know, we are being joined by our West Campus and our South Campus. Let's put our hands together and welcome them to the service. All right, if everybody can pull out a blank piece of paper, number it 1 to 5, we're going to have a pop test. I hated that phrase when I was a student. You walk into class and talking to your friends, the bell rings, you sit down, and the teacher says those words. I did not like pop quizzes. I'm not going to give you a pop quiz today. I'm not. I'm going to give you a multiple choice test instead. All right, here we go. I'm going to give you some quotes, and I want you, inside your mind, write it down on a piece of paper in front of you, A, B, C, or D. Don't say it out loud if you know the answer. And don't cheat. It's just church, right? It's going to be tough for some of us here, I know. Okay. Here's the first quote, and then I'm going to give you a multiple choice, right? Don't panic. We all can guess. It's the way we made good grades on the SAT, right? Choose B. All right. Here's a quote. I am now the most miserable man living. If what I feel were equally distributed to the whole human family, there would be not one cheerful face on earth. Who said that? A, Bill Buckner. No baseball fans here, I guess. B, Richard Nixon. C, Job, Bible Job. D, Abraham Lincoln. Again, write your letter for that quote. Second quote. Jesus has a very special love for you, but as for me, the silence and the emptiness is so great that I look and do not see and do not hear. Who said that? A, Benjamin Franklin. B, Elton John. C, Billy Graham. D, Mother Teresa. Write down your answer, A, B, C, or D. Last quote. I've had enough. Take my life. I've got to die sometime, and it might as well be now. Who said that? A, William Wallace. B, Butch Cassidy. C, Edgar Allan Poe. Or D, Elijah the prophet. Everybody have the answer? Are you ready for the answers? Here they are. The first quote, who said they'd be the most miserable person on planet Earth, was who? D, Abraham Lincoln, right? The second quote about Jesus loves you, but I can't hear Jesus and he's empty. Who said that? Mother Teresa. The last quote, things are so bad that I want to die, I don't want to live anymore, was Elijah. Now let's think about that for a while. That means the greatest president in the history of our country, with one notable exception, but the greatest president in the history of our country, thank you, Abraham Lincoln, the most admired woman in the last century in the world, Mother Teresa, and the greatest prophet in the entire Old Testament who appeared in a sequel in Luke 11 in the Star Trek Transfiguration with Christ, Elijah. All three of these phenomenal, gifted, influential people battled depression Depression. Where they felt so low, so down, so empty, they didn't want to carry on. Depression is an epidemic in our society today. It's pandemic in the United States. We are one of the most depressed nations on planet Earth. Every demographic in our country has been affected by depression, except one demographic that we'll talk about later. Everyone except one. That's amazing. We live in what I believe is the greatest country on planet Earth. I really do believe that about our country. We have so many freedoms. We have so many advantages. We have such great medical care and food and all these opportunities and technology. And yet amongst all of that, we struggle as a nation, but not only as a nation, but as individuals with depression. Studies say that 1 out of every 4 Americans will deal or go through a major season of depression in their lifetime. 1 out of 4. We all will have to deal with the black cloud of depression. And as we're talking about this incredible disease, subject, phenomenon today, most of us are on a continuum when it comes to depression. There are some of us here that are dealing with a chemical imbalance. There's some of us who are going through a season of depression. There's some of us that are in situational, depressing situations and circumstances. So we're all on a continuum sometimes when it comes to depression. And today we're going to look at a story about a guy who dealt and struggled and battled depression. As a matter of fact, the Bible is full of people, men and women, who had to deal with depression. And today we're going to look at the story of Elijah. We're going to look at a segment of his life and how he handled depression, because you've got to handle depression. You have to deal with depression, or depression will deal with you. It's dangerous to allow depression to go unchecked in your life. It's dangerous, and that's why we have to talk about it today. How did Elijah get to a point where he made that confession out loud that he no longer wanted to live? He wanted his life to end. How did he get there? If anybody would be the, I guess, least likely candidate for depression, it would have to be Elijah. You know, I know a lot of times people who are skeptical, maybe they're agnostic or atheist, or perhaps they're even a Christian, they're saying, God, I wish God would give me some sign. If God would just do a miracle, then everything would be okay. Listen, Elijah saw and performed incredible miracles. Raised a young boy from the dead, saw God supernaturally provide food. He saw miracles. Elijah took a stand in a godless society. I mean, you think our country is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and some of the things that we're saying and believing right now? Listen, Elijah faced the same thing in his nation, in his land. And like an Eric Metaxas, you know, he took a stand in an unpopular stand in his society. He was willing to stand up to the craziness and stand for truth and stand for God. Elijah, you know, went to battle, the big showdown on Mount Carmel. Do you remember that? All those prophets and stuff of Baal, and they had this massive showdown, and it was Elijah versus hundreds of these satanic prophets, and Elijah did all these miracles, and he called down fire from heaven. He prayed, and a drought that had been going on for 3.5 years had stopped, and all these people turned to God because they saw his miraculous power, and thousands were following him. So you would think Elijah, especially at this point in his career, would be, hey, he's at the top. He's on the cover of all the magazines. He's king of the world. But we find him right after the peak moment, if you would, in his life, dealing seriously with depression. And I think as we look at his story today, we can learn a lot about the do's and the don'ts, if you would, and the pitfalls of dealing with depression. Look at 1 Kings 19:1-5. If you're wondering, how in the world did Elijah, after all that, fall into a depression? Well, it has to do with a mean old woman. Check it out. Verse 1. And I'm reading out of the Living Translation today. And I'm doing that because there's a lot of narrative content. So I'm reading out of the Living Bible. When I was a little boy, I had a green leather Living Bible. Controversial. It was not King James. All we have is King James. So I'm reading out of the Living Bible. Forgive me of the delayed controversy. Here we go. It says, when Ahab told Queen Jezebel what Elijah had done and that he had slaughtered the prophets of Baal, she sent this message to Elijah. You killed my prophets, and now I swear by the gods that I'm going to kill you by this time tomorrow. Again, Elijah had just stared down death on Mount Carmel. He had just virtually faced an entire army and society by himself. And now one little lady called Queen Jezebel puts out a death threat on him, a hit, and he is running for his life. Check it out. It says, so Elijah fled for his life. This is verse 3. He went to Beersheba, a city of Judah, and left his servant there. Then he went on alone in the wilderness, traveling all day, and sat down under a broom bush. And maybe your translation says a juniper tree. And into the wilderness, traveling all day, and sat down under that bush and prayed that he might die. Here's a quote. I've had enough. He told the Lord, take my life. I've got to die sometime. It might as well be now. And he lay down and went to sleep beneath the broom bush. Elijah, a man of God, a man who had seen the miraculous power of God, a leader of leaders, an iconic figure in the Bible. Dealing, grappling, struggling with simply the desire to carry on and the desire to live. And we see right off the bat, Elijah is not really handling his depression and this down state very well. The first thing he does is to run away. He thinks if I can just change location, things will get better. And then he sends his servant away. And then he goes where? Alone into the wilderness. That's not how we deal and face depression. Isolation is not an effective strategy for dealing with the dark cloud of depression. There was a Harvard study out years ago that was observing men and how they handle depression. And it said, here's what men do. Rather than deal with depression, they will self-medicate to enliven their dead feelings by drinking, drugging, womanizing, burying themselves in work, overeating, and overspending. The researcher goes on to talk about how radical isolation occurs, pulling away from intimacy and relationships and pulling away from life itself. Isolation, pushing people away, is no way to handle depression. I saw a story recently about a young high school student who started experiencing bouts of depression her freshman year, sophomore year, junior year. She was involved in the church. She had a good family. Everything looked okay on the outside, but she knew going into her senior year that she had to get help. But she said how her depression isolated her from friends and family. Things looked happy on the outside, but on the inside, she was hurting. On the outside, Elijah looked like a success, but on the inside, he was hurting. He was drowning, and he was alone. If we are going to effectively deal with depression, battle depression, fight depression, the first thing we have to do is we must ask for help. We must ask for help. I saw a 30-something man from England recently who battled depression, and it was leading him down that dark tunnel of despair. And he said, I decided to do the toughest thing I've ever done in my life. And that was to tell someone and ask for help. We can't conquer depression. We can't manage depression by ourselves. It's not possible. We're not smart enough. We're not strong enough. We're not spiritual enough. God didn't set it up that way. So you need to ask for help. I need to ask for help when I feel depression coming on and it stays and it won't go away. The feeling that everything has lost its meaning, that life seems kind of blur and fuzzy. You don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to engage in relationships. You don't want to work. You don't want to go to school. You can't remember what it was like to feel happy. So if you're battling depression here today, whatever you do, get help. For some of you, getting help may mean tomorrow, call a doctor, go see a therapist, go see a counselor, and say, hey, I'm struggling and I need help. Some people need medication if there's a biochemical imbalance. But we all need to ask for help. Listen, I wouldn't be here today completing sentences if I had not reached out and asked for help when I was going through a depressive season in my life. I wouldn't be here. We need each other. We need people who can come alongside of us and give us direction and wisdom and words of encouragement when we're going through depression. Elijah, the great man of God, the prophet, struggling, battling with depression. Abraham Lincoln battled depression. Mother Teresa battled depression. A lot of us in here fight and battle depression. And those of us who have find ways to manage it have reached out and asked for help. Whatever you're doing, if you don't hear anything the rest of the message, if you just kind of go to sleep, don't forget, ask for help. Ask for help. What did Elijah do? Let's see. He failed the first test. Let's see what happened to Elijah. Look at verse 5. It says, but he was sleeping. An angel touched him and told him to get up and eat. He looked around and saw some bread baking on hot stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. Then the angel of the Lord came again and touched him. Get up and eat some more, for there is a long journey ahead of you. So he got up, ate and drank, and the food that was given to him was enough to give him strength to travel 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, where he lived in a cave. But the Lord said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? So Elijah now has made a positive step forward in dealing with his depression. What did he do? Well, the first thing he did is he ate something. He ate some good, healthy food. He carbo-loaded because he had a long journey. What else did he do? He got up and he went to where the angel said. He went to Mount Horeb, which was the place of God. It was the place and the mountain in Sinai where God had given Moses the 10 Commandments. So he got moving. He was in motion. He was hopefully sleeping a normal rate, and he was eating. So he made some positive strides forward. So he made one step forward, and then he made 2 steps backwards, because you see, once he got in Mount Orb, what did he decide to do? I think I'm going to live in a cave. I'm depressed, I'm down, I don't want to live anymore. I think living in a cave would be a good idea, a buena idea. No, it's not. It's not. So he isolates again. But again, isn't that life? When we're struggling with something, when we're battling with something like depression, it's not like, boom, all of a sudden lights go on. Man, that was a great message. I'm not depressed anymore. I'm out of it. Woohoo! It doesn't work that way. That's not life. That's not real life. Real life is struggling. Real life is like Elijah. Yes, I take that positive step of movement, the positive step of eating, the positive step of being outside and being exposed to nature. But he takes that back step and still is isolating. He still doesn't want to bring anyone in to the inner circle of his heart and soul. But he's making some progress. And if you have battled depression, if you have looked at people, whether they're medical doctors or psychologists or psychiatrists or other folks who have studied how to deal with depression, everyone will say, you got to get help. You have to get help. Everyone will say the second thing, and that is you must move, and we must move outside. When we're depressed, we don't want to move. When we're depressed, we want to lie there. When we're depressed and we've bawled our eyes out and prayed our eyes out and we're on the floor, we don't want to get up. But we have to get up. We have to get moving, get our bodies in motion. If that's just simply walking around the house, but it would be a great idea to walk outside of your house or walk outside of your apartment and get into nature. There's something about vitamin D, there's something about sunlight and what it does to our brain, the serotonin, that lifts us up when we're feeling depressed. I read about a new type of therapy. It's very basic. It's called ecotherapy, and researchers at Essex University in Britain did a study on 108 people who were dealing with serious depression. And when some of them chose to go outdoors and have a half an hour walk, 71% said they felt better about themselves. When they went cycling and hiking and they did something outside of themselves and participated in a conservation project or something like that, 94% said they felt better about their mental health. When we're feeling down, when life is slow, when we feel the heavy weight of depression, you want to stay inside. We want to stay in bed. We don't want to move. But we have to get up and move. We have to get up and walk. I think about that young guy, Jake, who asked for help, the guy from Britain, and he was out walking his dog, and he realized, this is when he was dealing with depression, he had walked his dog 25 miles. And then he had the idea, I can use walking, I can use running as a way to cope and battle my depression and get that news out there. I know some people will say, well, if you're going through depression, you need to exercise. Well, you probably do, but sometimes that's not very helpful, because maybe that's why you're depressed, because you don't want to exercise. And so movement is better. Just getting outside is better. And doing something that's external, that's physical, is better. If you can find an activity like biking or walking or hiking, that's great. If you can find something you do working out, fantastic. Again, when you look at the Bible and the characters in the Bible, and you look at the disciples and Jesus, they walked hundreds. I think Jesus walked, they calculated 1,400 something miles. They were always in motion. We got to ask for help. when we're depressed. We have to get help. We have to move outdoors in nature, in the light. Elijah's making some progress, but he's still in that cave. And when he's in the cave, God asked him, Elijah, why are you in the cave? And he says, Elijah, get outside. Get outside. I'm going to speak to you. So Elijah goes outside to the entrance of the cave, and there's a big wind. Massive windstorm. And Elijah thinks, maybe that's God telling me something, but it says God was not in the wind. Then there's an earthquake, rumbling. Earthquakes are real. My daughter is in school at in Los Angeles right now. Earthquakes are real. And there's an earthquake. Maybe this is God speaking through the earthquake, but Elijah says, no, God's not in the earthquake. Then there's a fire, which sometimes is a symbol of God's presence. There's a fire, and maybe God is in the fire. He's speaking to me through the fire. Maybe that's the sign, Elijah thinks, but then he thinks, no, God's not in the fire. But then, there's a still, small voice, a whisper. And God is speaking to him. He knows Elijah is down. He knows that he's in the dark cave of depression. And God Almighty who spoke the world into existence whispers to Elijah. Elijah, why are you here? He says, Elijah, I've got something for you to do. This depression is not forever. I have something for you to do. And verse 15, it said, the Lord told him, Elijah, go back by the desert road to Damascus. And when you arrive, anoint Hazael to be king of Syria. Then anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, to be king of Israel. And then anoint Elisha to replace you as my prophet. The third thing that we have to do, that Elijah has to do, that we all have to do when we're battling with depression, is that we must get back into the game. We must get back into the game. And getting back into the game is getting around people who love you, getting around people who care for you, getting reconnected with the community who knows you, because God has something for us to do. No matter where you are today, no matter what you're struggling with, what you're dealing with, the heaviness, listen, if you have a pulse, God still has a purpose for your life. He still does. God was not finished with Elijah, and God is not finished with you. But we have to get around people and get involved in a replenishing community. I like to follow fighting and combat sports. When I was little, my dad and my brothers, we watched Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier and George Foreman from the 5th Ward here in Houston, and we were amazed by boxers. And now you have this new sport, mixed martial arts, and it's interesting whether you're talking about that sport or boxing. All those sports have their corner they go to. Do you know what I'm talking about? In between rounds. I mean, they're just beaten up and bruised and cutting me, you know, and they're just messed up. And they've got the cut guy helping them over the eye. They have the other person telling them, man, you need to move your hands that way. They have the other person saying you need to do this with your fancy footwork. They have people in their corner to help them, to tell them to stay in the fight. Because the people in the corner, you can tell by looking at their gnarled up cauliflower ears and their flat noses, they've been in the fight themselves. They know what it's like. And when we get around people who have been through these seasons, these dark valleys, these tough times of depression, they can give us life-giving words and help us to get back in the game and rediscover God's purpose for our life. We have to ask for help. We're going through this. We have to do that. We have to move and get outside, and we have to get back into the game and get reconnected with community. It's so critical. Do you remember earlier in the message here, I said there's one group, there's one demographic in the United States that virtually has zero depression. There's one demographic. By the way, I got this information from a psychiatrist or MD who studies depression, not a Christian, not on our team, okay? So let me give you, let's do one more multiple choice test, right, to close this thing up. Here it is. Depression has affected every major segment of society except one. Name the major demographic depression has not affected. A, come on, Republicans. B, Democrats. C, Hollywood celebrities. D, evangelical Christians. I apologize for the redundancy in this list. Thank you. Okay. E, none of the above. A, B, C, D, or E. Think about it. Who says it's D? Evangelical Christians. It's always D. D. Got a couple of D's. How about C's? Celebrities. Come on. Come on. So let's do it for celebrities. Come on, they got it all. It's okay, celebrities. Democrats, right? 35 candidates running for primary, 35,000. They can't be. Republicans, right? How many said E, none of the above? E. Oh, yeah, E. I can see it. E, west, south, here. E. Do you know the only demographic in America that doesn't battle depression? The Amish. The Amish. Why is it? Is it their love for barns and their hatred for buttons? I don't think so. I don't think so. Why is that? Living in the 1700s, pre-industrial age. Why are the Amish not as depressed as the rest of us? Maybe it's because they spend a lot of time outside in nature. Maybe it's because they have a tight-knit community, really tight. Maybe it's because they have a deep connection with the God who made them and his purpose for their life. Now, I'm not saying we need to move to a farm in Pennsylvania. But there's something to be said about that when it comes to battling depression.